Hello there, my name is Alexandru, but you can call me Alex, and in this video I'm going over an interruptible dialogue system. We're going in Wwise to see how that is set up, and then in Unity in actual game. I have a video covering this game that I made to become a better sound designer, so be sure to also check that out. The first time that I think I've listened to an interruptible dialogue system was when I was playing Uncharted 4 on my PlayStation in 2017 or 18. And I really loved how the characters would just stop on their way, do their stuff, come back, and then resume their conversation. Of course, since then, more games have adopted this type of system, and I was always curious how could I manage to do that. Luckily, I stumbled upon Gunes Uyanik, and I hope I didn't butcher your name, a video on YouTube about interruptible dialogue system in Wwise. Alrighty, let's jump into Wwise and see how that is set up there. So as you can see in my drone dialog folder, I have a drone dialog switch that has 5 queues, a drone interrupt random container, and a drone resume random container. By the way, in our specific case, the drone is our NPC. The dialog queues are the main dialog. The drone dialog switch contains the actual dialog, and the other components, we are using them to create that immersive feeling of an interruptible dialogue. Okay, we can also take a listen.
Hi, visitor.
And of course, the resume and interrupt are random containers because we want something different every time we stop or resume the conversation.
Yes, you can definitely walk away. We can resume our conversation later. As I was saying,
we're using a switch container because it's just easier to have an RTPC driving the dialogue, but to see the full effect and the full magic of this system, we have to jump in Unity. Until then, let's see how the events are set up. In the event system, we are playing the drone dialog switch, stopping the interrupt, we don't want that overlapping, and also in our case, pausing the drone emitter loop. Then, if we want to interrupt the dialogue, let's say the character moves away from our NPC, we play the interrupt random container, we stop the drone dialog switch, and then we resume our music emitter drone loop. Again, this is specific for this case, so you can just forget about the music emitter drone loop. If we go again and talk with our NPC, we have the play dialog resume. So we have the resume container followed by the delayed switch container. I made it so that my resume audio clips are actually similar in length, so we don't have problems with the delayed dialog queue. We stop the interrupt because we don't want overlapping dialog lines, and that is pretty much it. You can see that in our event, we actually have the RTPC disabled. We're not accessing this through Wwise, and we're actually accessing that through code. And we're gonna see in Unity how that is done. In order to make this happen, in order to make this system happen, the biggest question was, when do we know that an event or an audio clip from Wwise has finished playing? After digging, I found out that in Unity is actually pretty simple to do this with the in-engine audio system, but with Wwise it was a little bit more complicated than I've expected. Nonetheless, after some painful searching, I found the callback function that will help us determine when an event has finished playing in Wwise. Extra tip, this also takes into account reverb, so if you have a reverb tail playing, the event will not be finished, because of course there's still sound being played. I found this out the hard way. Okay, so we have the void callback function. I don't want to pretend that I understand it, but at least we can use the call type to determine if an AK event is at the end. After that, of course, we go to onTriggerEnter, because we have to enter a trigger collider in order to know that we can start a conversation with our NPC. We set true to the robot trigger, and that allows our update function to know that we are inside the collider. we have some conditions. So if we've interacted and dialog queue is less than 5, then we resume the dialogue. But if we didn't interact, we go to else. So at the beginning, we always go to else. Now we can post our dialog event using the callback function. And now we've talked once, so we have to increment the dialog queue. And we set that the dialog playing is true. In the update function, we have to make sure that the process is still going. So update is happening every frame and on collision is happening only once. But we want to have the dialogue still playing. And how do we do that? Well, let's take a look. If we've entered the collider, the robot trigger is true. Good. Is dialogue playing false? That means are we at the end of a line? Okay, then there we go. And of course, dialogue queue has to be less than 5. So after we've entered, there is one line of dialogue. We know we're at the end of a dialogue line because of the callback function. We set the RTPC. We post the new dialogue queue. So now let's say we're at the second dialogue queue. We increase that. So we know that the next line should come. We set the RTPC again. And then we put the bool is dialogue playing to true. Why do we do that? Because we don't want overlapping lines. So the way this is set up is that whenever we have the end of an event, is dialogue playing is set to false. You can think about it as a retrigger. So we are in update function, and when is dialogue playing set to false, only then we fire up a new post event. But while we're in the post event, is dialogue is playing is set to true. And that's why it's also on trigger enter, because we don't want the overlapping line with the update function. If we exit, so on trigger exit, if we exit the collider, as long as we're under 5, so the last dialogue queue, it's 5. So as long as we're under 5, we decrease the dialogue queue, because remember, it's an interruptible system. So we want to go back to the last line and not jump to the next line. So he has to rewind back. So that's why we decrease by 1. We set the RTPC value. We post the event. The order is super important because if you post the event and then set the RTPC value after, of course, it's going to be mangled. We set interactive to true because when we exit the collider, we've interacted with our NPC character. And then the robot trigger is false. Phew! Okay, that was something. And now, let's test it out.
Now that we have a human entity around, I was afraid I will forget my lines. We haven't received the visitor in 49 days. Yes, you can definitely walk away. We can resume our conversation later. Glad you are back. So, things got quiet really fast since the new took over.
Okay, nice. In this video, I showed you how to implement a dialogue system made in Wwise into Unity using the callback function. I hope you learned something new and I hope you can use this in your own game. And if you have a better idea of how to do this, please just leave a comment below. Maybe you have the documentation, maybe you have your own video. Let's just build this community up. Okay, thank you very much for watching. See you later.